Hey, good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome to Cowboy Criminology. I, of course, am your host, Eric Judd, the Cowboy Criminologist. So, if you've been following my videos about Audrii Cunningham, uh, I stepped away from that for just a little bit, talking about crimes against kids. It is very taxing. You think of life wasted and life cut short, and I just don't think there's anything more tragic than that. And so, uh, there's been an idea kicking around in my head about the main suspect, Don Stephen McDougal. And before I put that out there, I wanted to do a little research and make sure that my logic train hadn't become derailed somewhere, and that I was missing something. But I think I have a pretty good idea of what happened from a criminological perspective, and this is based on research done of past cases that are very similar. So I'm going to share this video with y'all uh, about what was released about Audrii Cunningham's autopsy, and it didn't provide a whole lot of information. It said that she died from homicidal violence caused by blunt force trauma, and when you're getting information about a case in real time, you have to understand that law enforcement and prosecutors and forensic experts are not going to throw out every bit of information that they have. All right, it doesn't make any sense. It makes it very uh, one, and I think the main reason is to protect the integrity of the case. Two, it's to protect the integrity of the prosecution, because if you have a whole bunch of information floating out there, you risk contaminating your jury pool, and then you raise all these issues that can come up in an appeal, and you have a case that can just drag on and drag on and drag on. Okay. Um, let's face it. I think the only good way to die is in bed in your sleep, surrounded by loved ones at a ripe old age, and that's if you absolutely have to die. I think I took some kind of comfort in knowing that Audrii wasn't alive when she went into the water. They didn't mention anything about water in the lungs, and that could be details that have been withheld that could change. Drowning is a horrible, horrible way to die. But we're gonna run through this news clip from Fox 26 out of Houston, and we're going to talk about it. All right, so let's go ahead and start.
The Examiner has released 11-year-old Audrii Cunningham's cause of death, saying that she died of homicidal violence. Fox 26's Dominic Keith is live in Polk County with this update. Dominic.
Yeah, mourners are covering this community in a sea of purple. 11-year-old Audrii Cunningham's favorite color, particularly here at the Trinity River, where the 11-year-old's body was found in the water on Tuesday. And we now know, according to the Harris County ME, little Audrii died of homicidal violence, including blunt head trauma.
I'm truly blessed to have given birth to such an amazing little girl.
Even as 11-year-old Audrii Cunningham's mom tries to grieve the loss of her little girl, we caught up with her at this sunset candlelight vigil.
You know, hopefully with all of our candles together, it'll be bright enough, maybe she can see it.
It clearly isn't easy to understand how a little girl could be taken away so tragically. According to the Harris County Medical Examiner's Office, the 11-year-old died of homicidal violence, including blunt head trauma, and the manner of death is homicide.
Her life was cut short way too soon, but the way in which we lost her.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop right there. So the medical examiner has released that information, what the cause of death was, and I think I'm hoping there's more evidence that's going to come out. That's going to come out that explains why she had to die. And I'm reasonably sure I can connect those, fill in the gaps of what's missing. And it may not be exactly what happened, but I think, like I said, based on reviewing previous cases that are similar in nature to this, I think we can safely play the numbers based on what we know about the suspect and what the medical examiner has released. And I think we can kind of piece things together. If you have other ideas of how you think this unfolded, I'd be really curious to hear what y'all have to think. So let's finish this video. Let's see here.
Dr. Brent Hawkins says there have been a lot of tears and hugs in the hallways here at Creekside Elementary, where Audrii was in 5th grade. In fact, she's been here since kindergarten. So Livingston ISD has now formed a scholarship in Audrii's name and honor.
With a kid like Audrii, we feel like that school was her safe place, and she loved school so that it's very befitting that we would have a scholarship that would live on and help other students in their education.
So maybe I'm reading too much into this, but a kid like Audrii, and that kind of makes me wonder if maybe teachers or faculty or administration had concerns about her home life or something like that. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot known about her home life. And based on the way you hear people talk about her, I mean, she seemed to be pretty well adjusted. So, like I said, maybe I'm just reading a little bit too much into that. But you know what? I don't envy his position in having to explain this to 10 and 11-year-old kids, why one of their friends, why one of their classmates who was there just the day before isn't there today, and why they're not coming back, and especially under these horrible circumstances. Wow, I can't imagine being in that position. And crimes against children are absolutely horrible, and I think it brings out the bloodhound in really good investigators. But I also know it's really hard, and given my preference, I'd work crimes against adults any day of the week, just because crimes against children are they're horrible.
Reported missing last week Thursday after investigators say a family friend, Don Stephen McDougal, was supposed to take her to the school bus stop but never did. Take a look at this screenshot. A woman who used to be McDougal's neighbor reported this to police, saying it was late Wednesday when McDougal asked if she wanted to buy his SUV. Detectives say it's the same vehicle certain evidence was seen in before it was found at the crime scene. McDougal is now charged with Audrii's murder.
Okay, so that's interesting. That was something that hadn't been released, or at least I hadn't seen it. Given his situation, his living situation, and if you believe that he was just trying to get back on his feet and better himself, why in the world would he sell his means of transportation to get back and forth to a job? I've known a lot of people who have been hard up for money, but I've never known anybody who was so hard up that they sold their only means of transportation that could get them to employment. That doesn't fit. And the timing of this whole thing is going to be really hard for the defense to explain, unless he's been trying to sell this vehicle for a while. He had another means of transportation, what have you. But the fact that he's already trying to get rid of the vehicle the same day this girl goes missing, a girl who is trusted to his care, custody, and control. And now all of a sudden, he's got to sell this vehicle or wants to sell this vehicle. That's going to be really interesting. I'm curious how the defense is going to explain that one.
Anymore. And so we have to change the way we think about protecting children.
Well, it's not Mayberry anymore.
Livingston ISD has counselors on hand available for students and staff. And by the way, the district's Audrii Cunningham scholarship, the amount of it will be contingent upon donations. No doubt they're going to receive a whole lot. Reporting live in Polk County, I'm Audrii Keith, Fox 26 News.
So y'all, if you just saw that there's a scholarship that's been set up in Audrey's name, if you have that on your heart to donate, I encourage you to do so. Who knows how that donation, how that scholarship can affect somebody's future? So that's what a wonderful memorial. So let's talk about McDougal right quick. So if you followed my last video or my last couple of videos, you know that I've been trying to start piecing together aspects of behavior for McDougal's, to explain his actions. And in my last video, it showed a reporter interviewing one of his previous victims who was around the same age and has physical similarities to Audrey. And she mentioned how he came into her room and threw her cousin out of the bed and tried to get in bed with her, tried to take off her pants, and she ran away. She fought back against him. All of these things. And I said in that video, I said, McDougal has very poor impulse control. And so here's how I think things may have unfolded. And I may be off, but if I'm off, I don't think I'm missing the mark by much. So here's what I think happened. So when McDougal was supposed to take Audrey to school, I think he had his eye on her for a long time. He's a preferential offender, based on what we can tell from his last victim. We've already established he's got poor impulse control. So once he makes his mind up to do something, that's it. There's no giving it a second thought. There's no real aspect of control. So what I think his intention was he was going to take her, he was going to sexually assault her and try to establish a quote unquote relationship with her. And I believe Audrey fought back. And whether that was physically or whether she said, I'm going to tell my mom, I'm going to tell my dad, I'm going to tell my grandparents, whatever the case was. McDougal is the type of person who has enough of a criminal record and a serious enough criminal record that really any felony, well, considering he already had an active warrant for aggravated assault, any felony he's tied up with is going to add years onto his sentence. And so understanding his situation, I think he took it upon himself to make sure that Audrey would not be able to say anything to anybody. So he took her life. And this is a very common escalation. If you look at his past criminal history, which includes robbery, enticement of a child, which how do you justify dropping that? Man, that prosecutor had dropped the ball. That was not in the interest of justice. That was, I'm gonna save that. I'm not gonna dignify that, but you know what? What a shame. And knowing that this time the book would be thrown at him he figured he had nothing to lose. So he dispatches her with blunt force trauma, and then he disposes of the body by trying to get by getting Audrey into the river. And how that was accomplished, I don't think we know. I haven't seen anything about how he got her into the river. But then after that, after she's reported missing, because I think it said that she was reported missing around 5:30, and then around 6, I think, is when that text message was sent. He's trying to get rid of the vehicle. All right. Now, yeah, obviously there's a lot of things you have to fill in. But if you look at it from point A to point B, I think my breakdown, I think my analysis of the events and the way they unfolded is accurate. And we'll find out more. I'm really interested in the forensic evidence in this case. Forensics is going to tie this whole thing together. What cell phone data shows, what that rope that was found in his vehicle, believed to be the same rope found tied around Audrey and the rock. I'm really interested to see how that's all tied together, and I'm interested to see how he got her, how it's determined he got her, how he got Audrey into the river. Just an absolutely tragic case. And it's one of those things that, you start thinking about how people can do these types of things to other people, especially a child that young. And I'm not trying to sway you on the death penalty one way or the other, but if you're against the death penalty, maybe this case makes you see that some people just have that coming. And when you take a child like that, I've got nothing for you. And, and I'm sure a lot of people share that sentiment, but you know what, if you disagree with the death penalty because of moral or religious reasons, you know what, I totally respect that. It's one of the great philosophical debates. But you see a case like that, and you know what, my sympathy for him goes completely out the window. And like I said in one of my previous videos, he's living on borrowed time one way or the other. If they can prove that McDougal's the one who did this, whether he gets the death penalty or life in prison without parole, I really do think it's just a matter of time because of the publicity. So now I want to go to the case of Elijah Vue. This poor kid, he's been missing for 3 weeks. And the mother's boyfriend was supposed to be watching him, and he's missing. So let me kind of catch you up with where we are on that. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to we're going to watch this video.
Tonight, 3-year-old Elijah Vue is still missing, and his mother is facing new charges in connection with his disappearance. Katrina Bauer appeared in court this morning. Bauer now faces a misdemeanor charge of child neglect for a different child, a 6-year-old.
And a felony charge of child neglect has been upgraded to chronic child neglect for Elijah's case. Now we're hearing from Bauer's own mother, who wrote a letter with shocking testimony against her daughter. Rachel Perry was listening in and has you covered.
State of Wisconsin versus Katrina Bauer.
In a Manitowoc County courtroom Thursday morning, Katrina Bauer, mother of missing 3-year-old Elijah Vue, faced new and upgraded charges. Her attorney claiming she is devastated.
She's been worried sick, not knowing where her son is.
But a letter from Bauer's mother, Jody Bauer, claims her daughter is verbally and emotionally abusive. The Manitowoc County District Attorney read from that letter in court.
Her story always depends on her audience. At this time, rather than aligning in locating her son, she feels the need to reiterate what a good guy Jesse is.
Jesse Vang is Bauer's
boyfriend. I'm gonna stop the video right there. And there's a lot of interesting things going on there. my first thing, the first thing that really pops out at me is she's been given another charge of misdemeanor child neglect for a 6-year-old child in the home. Now, I don't know what the custody situation, living situation is in this case, but I think my opinion would change if I found out that the 6-year-old was a female. And there are certain things that are starting to pop out to me about Katrina Bauer's personality coming out, and the fact that her own mother would write a letter to the court talking about how events always revolve around how they affect her. And even with all this stuff going around, she's trying to protect Jesse Vang, her live-in boyfriend, which is odd, because I think if you find out that your child is missing and you left that child in somebody else's custody, you do everything you could, and I'm going to go ahead and capitalize every letter of everything, because I think any good parent would go to just amazing lengths to figure out what happened. Well, let's go ahead and let's keep going with this.
He's also charged with child neglect after telling authorities he fell asleep on February 20th, and when he woke up, Elijah was gone. At one point, Bauer's mother says her daughter faked her own abduction.
Katrina faked a forced abduction and had missing person reports filed in California. She was located in Minnesota.
The majority of Thursday's
I'm
court
gonna stop right there. Okay. So let me explain something to you. The younger the child, the more likely it is that somebody in the home had something to do with their abuse, with their disappearance, with their homicide. Okay. You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to figure that out. Okay. It's a very basic concept, because the social circle for children, especially the younger they are, you have a very, very small group of people that have access to the child. Okay. And this is what I call the Lindbergh defense. Okay. Jesse Vang says he fell asleep, and when he woke up, Elijah was gone. If you look back, excuse me, if you look back, and every time this has been tried, it's almost exclusively the case that it's the person who is responsible for care, custody, and control of the child that had something to do with the child. Whether they were assaulted, whether they were kidnapped, whether they were murdered, what have you. And this is very common for offenders to say. I fell asleep. When I woke up, the child I was supposed to be watching was gone. Now, the last time I remember this Lindbergh defense being used was 3-4 years ago. My wife and her friend were sitting on the couch, and they were watching a news brief. Man, I can't remember where it happened, but a guy fell asleep. I think he was the boyfriend of the little girl's mother. And he said he fell asleep, and when he woke up, the little girl was gone. Said he woke up, front door was open, and she was gone. He looked for her everywhere, and excuse me, looked for her everywhere, and then called the police because he couldn't find her. Well, when I heard that, and they showed the inside of the door, my wife's friend asked me what I thought about it, and I said the little girl's dead. And my wife and her friend took offense to that, and I got immediately confronted with you couldn't possibly know that. And I said, okay. I said, you got to figure, how tall is the average 3-year-old? And they gave an estimate, and I said, okay, if the child was actually able to reach up and grab a hold of the deadbolt, which is almost exclusively above the doorknob, would they have the physical strength and manual dexterity to unlock that? And they just kind of looked, and well, maybe he forgot to lock the deadbolt. Absolutely possible. Absolutely possible. But where was she supposed to be? Where was he supposed to be? And I said, y'all, in these cases, I said, you've got to understand. I said, the little girl's probably dead. And so I went on to work, and I get a call about 4 hours later, and it's my wife, and she goes, she said that her friend had called her and said that they had just found the little girl, and the little girl was murdered, and they had charged the boyfriend or the husband, whatever his relationship was. And she goes, how do you know that? And so I just explained it to her the same way I explained it to y'all. And unfortunately, it's very common. And the reason I call it the Lindbergh defense is Charles Lindbergh in the 30s was an American hero. He had flown solo across the Atlantic. He was a war hero. He had accumulated wealth, influence. He was somebody in America. And he and his wife had a baby. And the baby was taken out of his crib in the middle of the night. And the baby ended up found dead. And I don't think homicide was, if I remember correctly, homicide wasn't the cause, but I think it was exposure to the elements. And the people who had taken him, the little Lindbergh baby, they didn't know really how to care for a child. And so that's why I call it the Lindbergh defense. Somebody came in while I was sleeping, while I was doing something, and the child was missing. So the first thing you have to look at in cases like this is, number one, why would the child be targeted by somebody outside of the family? And then you have to ask yourself, does this person have wealth? Does this person have influence? Does this person have wealth, influence, or fame that would draw somebody to want to take this child? Would they be able to pay a ransom for the child? Would somebody be willing to pay a ransom on their behalf? Criminal enterprise kidnapping is a very specialized criminal skill, and it's not very popular because it's not very profitable. And so in young mothers young mothers, I think that's fair to say, there's this, when they have children young, there's this idea that they're missing out. They're seeing their friends going out partying, having a great time. They're doing whatever or whoever they're doing. And they're having this great time. They're just living this life that this other individual feels left out of because they have a child to care for. And it's very common, and the defense is always the same. And it's always something innocuous. I was taking a nap. I was doing dishes. I was in the tub. Whatever it is, it's always something innocuous, but it's usually something close to the home. Okay. And when it's in the home, in or around the home, and by around the home, I mean on the property, there's always some innocuous reason that their attention was divided and they didn't have eyes on the child. And the only thing that they can come up with is somebody came in and snatched the child for themselves. Okay. When you play the numbers, you're talking about what is reasonable and what is most likely to have happened. All right. Does that mean you shut the door on outliers? Is it possible that somebody felt that the child was being mistreated or abused or neglected and said, you know what, they're better off with me, and they decide to go in and take the child? Yeah, that can absolutely happen. But neighbors, the parents, they're going to know that somebody has an unhealthy obsession with this child, and they're going to be able to point the police in that direction. And there's going to be evidence of that. Most likely, those types of kidnappings happen by people with severe mental illness, and they happen in public places, parks, malls, shopping centers, school bus stops, or sometimes even at the schools. Those have all happened, but they account for such a small portion. As an investigator, I would certainly assign a senior officer or a junior detective to go and run down that lead. And here's why. Even though I know that there's a very slight chance that that actually did happen. One, what if that turns out to be exactly what happened? You don't want to be seen by the defense focusing on one suspect. And a lot of times the defense is, well, you didn't have any other suspects, so you just honed in on my client because you want this person to be guilty. You want this, you looked at his criminal record and thought, this person couldn't have possibly cleaned up as whatever a defense attorney is going to say. But if you can show that you did your due diligence as an investigator and you sent people out to run down these other leads, and when you were able to corroborate where people were, corroborate their alibis, and you narrow that focus down to where the only person who could have committed the crime is the person that is on trial now, that's very hard to overcome. Good on the defense attorney for giving that defense a shot, but unfortunately, it's not going to stand up under close scrutiny if officers have taken the initiative to go beyond what they see and even investigate the slightest possibility that somebody else could be responsible. Okay. The other thing here is your child is missing, and you're Katrina Bauer, she's sitting there talking about how great a guy Jesse Vang is. And I think that's unusual for everybody. Your child is missing, and based on what her mother said about her past behavior and everything, this is it's actually less shocking because it leads me to believe that she has a particular personality disorder. Now, we'll do a video later on about the difference between being mentally ill and having a personality disorder, because they're not the same thing. Okay. But her son is missing, has been missing for 3 weeks. And she's more concerned with everybody knowing what a great guy Jesse Vang is instead of wanting to know what happened to my son. Okay. So we'll get back to that here in just a minute, and we'll finish this up.
Was focused on a motion filed by Bauer's attorney asking the court to modify her bond.
We are asking that the court amend the bond to one of a signature.
Maintaining Bauer isn't a flight risk or danger to society.
She's a resident of Wisconsin. She will not leave the state of Wisconsin.
But the state disagreed.
This defendant is facing some serious charges.
Yeah, we're going to stop right there. So her attorney is saying that she's not a danger to society, and I agree. I think she's a danger. Think she's a danger to her children. But a letter was just read by her mother saying that she had faked her kidnapping and she ended up in a different state, and there's all these things coming, and the attorneys like even agreed with that. So you can't say that she's not a flight risk, because she did that to gain attention for herself. What do you think she's going to do to get the attention off of her? She's going to disappear, all right, like a fart in the wind.
Concern. She knows she's facing potential imprisonment, which is an incentive to flee.
Judge Robert D. Wayne agreed with the state, denying the defense's motion. Bauer's boyfriend, Jesse Vang, also appeared in court, but without an attorney, so his hearing was rescheduled. He did announce plans to file for a bond reduction. Both Bauer and Vang are expected back in court on March 14th.
March 14th. So next week we're gonna want to take a look at what's going on there. I think it's interesting that Vang hasn't gotten an attorney yet, and that could be maybe he's got a criminal record where he thinks he can handle it. Maybe we're dealing with another McDougal. But I think this is going to come down to a little game investigators like to call who talks first. And the game of who talks first plays out as the person who cooperates gets something of a deal. Now, I think both of these individuals are culpable in Elijah's disappearance, and I don't think either of them should get a deal. But right now, that's not the main issue. The main issue is, where's Elijah? If he's alive, let's bring him home. Let's get him into the care of people who actually love him and want to take care of him. And if he's dead, let's bring him home so that he can be at rest. I know earlier in the case, law enforcement was searching a garbage dump for his body, and it's how horrific. You know, you think of there's an actual psychology to dumping a body, and where you place a body, or where a killer places a body. Hopefully I don't have any killers following me on this channel. That'd be weird. Anyway, we'll move past that creepy thought. But where a killer disposes of a body is very telling about how they view the individual. If they're in a very peaceful, serene place, that tells you that they respected the victim. They wanted the victim to be at peace where they were, and so they picked a beautiful place, something like that. When somebody is unceremoniously just dumped somewhere, whether that's in a river, whether that's in a garbage dump on the hillside in Southern California, Bianchi and Buono, of course I'm talking about you too. When you do stuff like that, you send a message about what you think the victim is worth. And I cannot imagine being called up to do a search in a dump to look for a child. And I just think, man, how terrifying, how horrible is that? And what does that say about the person who places that individual there? Okay. So there, a couple of things struck me, and I said that I think that Katrina Bauer has a personality disorder. Specifically, and I'm not a psychologist, but the difference between a criminological diagnosis is not a clinical diagnosis. A criminological diagnosis allows you to kind of get in the mindset of the criminal that you're tracking, or help you kind of focus the investigation based on what you know about your main suspects. So let me read this to you about histrionic personality disorder. And this comes out of the DSM-5, and it also comes from a paper out of the National Library of Medicine. Histrionic personality disorder, HPD, is a chronic and enduring condition marked by a consistent, pattern of attention-seeking behaviors. We had just talked about how she staged her own kidnapping. And an exaggerated display of emotion, typically emerging in late adolescence or early adulthood. Individuals with HPD are often characterized as narcissistic, self-indulgent. Remember, this Katrina's mom said that her version of a story changes on who her audience is. And flirtatious. Individuals with HPD may feel undervalued when not in the spotlight, leading to a persistent need of validation. And some of those behaviors often involve, flirtatious, dramatic, extroverted, and animated behavior. They may be vibrant, enchanting, overly seductive, or inappropriately sexual. People presenting with HPD typically demonstrate rapidly shifting and shallow emotions that others may perceive as insincere. So, like I said, I'm not offering a clinical diagnosis. I'm not qualified for that. But based on past cases, past studies, and my knowledge of these types of crimes against children, I think we've got point A to point B pretty well covered in Audrii Cunningham's case and in Elijah Vue's case. I think we know who's responsible, but we don't know what happened to him. And just like in the Kaylee Anthony case, the more time that goes by, if his body's out in the elements, evidence is going to degrade. I think eventually Katrina and Jesse are going to turn on each other, and it's just a matter of time. But you know, I hope and pray that they can, whether Elijah's alive or not, they can bring him home so he can at least be at peace, where people who love him and cherished his life can know where he is. All right, so y'all have a happy weekend. I hope everybody stays safe. Hope you have a good time. If you've got good weather coming up, I am going to put a link to the Audrii Cunningham scholarship if that's something you're interested in. If God puts that on your heart, I think that's amazing. Like I said, you never know. You never know how this might affect somebody and the level of education that they might achieve to make sure it never happens to somebody else again. So y'all take care. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll be back next week.